let's find a way where it makes sense so that industry wants to operate in a state, but that there's also some certainty so that you're not moving from city to city or county to county and having a whole different set of rules under which you're going to be operating.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 387. How can lawmakers ensure their jurisdictions are ready to reap the benefits of the drone industry? For that question, we head to Tyler, Texas, and speak with Scott Shtofman, Senior Manager of Grassroots Advocacy and Chapter Engagement for the Association of Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International. AUVSI is the world's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of uncrewed systems and robotics. It represents corporations and professionals from more than 60 countries involved in industry, government, and academia. AUVSI members work in the defense, civil, and commercial markets. In December, AUVSI launched their largest ever advocacy campaign to educate state and local lawmakers on industry-supported policy solutions to integrate commercial drone operations into the national airspace. Called Drone Prepared, the multi-state initiative is designed to help lawmakers ensure that their state or locality is ready for the benefits of future uncrewed and autonomous flight. Scott is a licensed attorney, certificated Part 107 remote pilot, and owner and pilot for Quad Access LLC. He is a well-known policy expert on SUAS, having specialized in policy and operations consulting. His role with Drone Prepared is to manage the advocacy efforts with state and local entities. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Scott talks about Drone Prepared, the potential legislative opportunities, and how local and state lawmakers can position their states and localities to receive benefits of the growing UAS industry. But before we hear from Scott, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in the podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. Now let's learn how Drone Prepared will provide value to state and local lawmakers, as well as drone industry participants. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Scott to introduce himself.
Hi there. My name is Scott Shtofman. I am the Senior Manager for Grassroots Advocacy and Chapter Engagement at AUVSI, the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International. My focus is on maintaining our more than 30 chapters around the United States and working very heavily on our focus on the drone industry in states from a legislative perspective. I also work on the federal side with our team. And, since we are all things uncrewed, we handle all things ground, water, air. But my domain expertise is really around drones, given my experience running my own business and being a chapter leader for AUVSI previously.
I think we've all heard of AUVSI, but just in case, can you give us a brief overview of what the organization does?
So AUVSI, the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, has been around in some form for the last 50 years. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary as an association. And essentially, we bring together a mixture of stakeholders in the uncrewed industry, whether you're an individual who runs your own business or you are a defense prime all the way on up. So our goal is to advance all things uncrewed, whether that's robotics, ground, water, air systems, or autonomy systems that are being built into advanced aviation. And we work to educate the public. We work to advocate for the industry on Capitol Hill or across states. Our goal is to improve public acceptance and education around the benefits that you can get from these systems and find ways to enable that U.S. leadership here in the space, as well as helping people understand what it is that all of the things that we can do with drones, autonomous systems, and advanced technology.
In December, AUVSI launched a new initiative to help lawmakers ensure that their state or municipality is ready to receive the benefits of future uncrewed and autonomous flight. It's called Drone Prepared. Scott, can you tell us about it?
So Drone Prepared is our current state advocacy program that we rolled out in late December of 2022. And essentially, it is a way for us to really live our mission of advocating for common sense regulations around drones and other technology at the state level. My involvement with AUVSI stemmed from being a chapter leader where we were fighting these avigation easement laws in states where essentially there were proposals to try and restrict drones to operating in these toll roads in the sky. So physically maintaining a specific area where drones needed to fly, as well as forcing them to pay into a system that may not have had any specific benefits to the operators. And so that was really just sort of a forcing function of trying to find ways that we as an association, as an industry, could get more proactive in the way that we are responding to legislation at the state level, to truly assert the FAA's federal preemptive authority over operations in the national airspace system. So trying to keep everything as safe as possible, and understanding where there is a collaboration, a line to be drawn between federal power and state power. So it's not a way for us to say that states shouldn't be involved in the operation of drones at all. It's let's find a way where it makes sense so that industry wants to operate in a state, but that there's also some certainty so that you're not moving from city to city or county to county and having a whole different set of rules under which you're going to be operating.
Who do you plan to work with in getting the message out?
So our goal with Drone Prepared is really to work with all levels of stakeholders and touch the drone industry. And that's just our first phase. We've reached out directly to legislators when we launched Drone Prepared. And then we've also been having discussions and participating in committees with departments of transportation in states, as well as departments of aviation. And we've also had reach outs from, local transportation planning organizations where you may be in a larger city and they have more resources and more understanding of sort of what are the issues involved. We've also heard from, smaller cities and towns that may not have the resources or the knowledge to really understand how should we be handling the future benefits of drones or the pitfalls, right? So our goal is to really centralize a knowledge center within the state. And a lot of the time that's within a Department of Transportation, a Department of Aviation. And so that's why one of the pillars of what we have in Drone Prepared is state level preemption around drone rules. So essentially, you have one main body that's making specific rules around how drones should or should not be operated that also works well and collaborates across the line with the things like Part 107 for commercial drone operations or recreational drone operations. We're trying to provide certainty and get rid of that sort of confusion on who has what power or who is best suited to speak to drone operators or the concerned public.
This sounds like a huge effort. How will you manage the communication with so many state organizations throughout the country?
Within the last year or so on the state side, we've been very heavily involved in tracking and either supporting or opposing legislation that's been put forward. So we have a number of legislative contacts already in place. And then one of the unique things that we have at AUVSI is we've got those more than 30 chapters around the United States. So those are either, small business operators that live, pay taxes, run their own business, and they have a lot of connections where they are, or we have a number of organizational advocacy level members that already have, their own policy teams that are spread out across the United States. So we had a lot of existing contacts. It's just been Drone Prepared has been a way for us to focus those efforts, but we're always open to and making new connections as we tell more people about the program, as we're involved in public speaking engagements, as we're able to do things like your podcast, more and more people hear about what it is that we're trying to do. And if they have questions, either because they don't like something we've said or they want to support what we're doing, we're always open to those conversations.
When it comes to legislation, not all states are on the same level. Some are more engaged than others. What's your sense of the awareness and receptiveness of the many states in supporting UAS legislation?
So, as you mentioned, there are certain states that are really forward-leaning and well-educated on the subject and have already put in some base legislation that makes a lot of sense, and or they've put in a lot of investment in the state into infrastructure or using drones regularly. And then there are some that have really not much of an idea of what's going on. So we find that the level of receptivity as well as the level of education really does vary. And, one of the ways that we wanted to start Drone Prepared was really to open the conversation. We needed a place to go from. So we put out a set of model legislation that really ascribes to some principles that we think make sense. But then we're always open to having a conversation into tailoring that wording into what makes sense for a specific state. We know that some states may be more focused or concerned about privacy. Some may be more interested in what are ways that we can open up potential economic development opportunities than others. And so we're trying not to be stuck in a completely rigid system, but we needed some place to start.
Speaking of starting, how will Drone Prepared be rolled out?
I think for us, we picked 4 key states that we wanted to focus on, which is a mixture of places where we thought we had good existing relationships, places that are really that forward-leaning technology interested state, and then places that also would set trends from a state perspective on legislation. So we picked Texas, Ohio, Mississippi, and California. And for us, it was important to understand sort of what should we expect going into each of those states based on what we know and who we know there, and really setting those expectations correctly. And in politics, things can change really quickly, especially from year to year as new legislators are brought in. And so it's really some places we have outside help from a lobbying perspective. Some places we're able to lean really heavily on our chapters. But our goal was really to start a lot of conversations. Luckily, we've had some early success in Mississippi. Our model legislation has already been turned into Senate Bill 2146, the Uncrewed Aircraft Systems Rights and Authorities Act, and they got referred to the Judiciary A Committee under Chair Fillingane. So we will likely be visiting the state of Mississippi as a team to really go there and testify, answer questions, and sort of knock out the kinks and objections to the legislation as it exists for Mississippi. And our goal is just to replicate that around the United States where it makes sense. We know that not every state is going to need the whole host of items that are listed in the model legislation, but it's something that's been industry informed. And we worked very closely with our partners at Wiley. They are really aviation law experts. So we wanted to also look at existing laws that were on the books and not completely write something from scratch. So our goal is really just, like I said, to have more of these conversations and find places that we can advance the conversation.
Tell us about the model legislation. What's in it and how's it structured?
So the goal for us, like I said earlier, is to really try and house the central arbiter or place of authority in the states around drone operations. So one of the things we wanted to do is to come up with ways that we preserve the powers that the states already have. So our bill is divided into sections. Essentially, the act is meant to have clear definitions around airspace, around what uncrewed aircraft are, around what uncrewed aircraft systems are. And that's leaning back towards the federal definitions around those things. And then also to have written into state law that operators that are abiding by the federal rules under Part 107 or as a recreational operator are able to fly in those states. These are things that you wouldn't necessarily think you would need to put on the books, but it really helps as something that states and operators and law enforcement can point to and have clarity and understanding of what it's going to be like if you're out there and you're flying and you talk to somebody. The information that we've been working from hasn't been the most clear. So our goal is to provide that clarity. The next thing that we wanted to really get to is that we wouldn't have to worry about registration systems that are above and beyond the existing system that's in place with the FAA. For us, if states want to put registration systems in place, there needs to be a very clear definition of what resources are going to be provided or benefits are going to be provided to uncrewed systems operators. Right now, we're not a heavy draw on things like air traffic control or otherwise. Personally, for me as a 107 operator, I ran my own business, and it was always important for me to understand what was going on in the airspace around me and understand the safety of my operation. So if I'm not having to actually get something like flight following that a general aviation aircraft would have, I'm not a draw on the air traffic control system. So what is it that I'm paying for if I'm paying into a registration system? And we really just don't think that that's the most workable version, at least not that we've seen or heard from of a lot of people that we work with. The other things that we really touch on is just trying to make sure that there's collaboration between state and federal on things that they're regulating, making it clear that, yes, states are able to regulate the takeoff and landing of drones on property that they own or control, and that the individual property owner has the right to avoid trespass via drone. But the piece that we want to clarify around drone trespass is that just because someone is flying over your property does not mean that you own the airspace above your property, right? There are, at least from a legal perspective, very clear wording around what drone trespass is. And that would be within the immediate reaches of the property. But it's not just about that. It's also about if you are causing a harm to the person on their enjoyment and use of the property. So we also have a legal white paper coming out that really details the sort of nitty gritty legal arguments. Our goal with Drone Prepared is to provide a set of documents from the most simple terms to the most complex terms. So because we know we're dealing with a whole host of stakeholders in the space, whether that's the general public who has no idea about what drones are, to experts in the industry, or people who are in the legislative space and are used to drafting bills and laws.
One of the issues that you mentioned earlier was navigation easements, or the concept of a drone highway in the sky. I've heard arguments for and against them, and it seems navigation easements are starting to emerge as a big talking point.
It is an issue that has emerged nationally, and it's something that we've been fighting over the last couple of years. Luckily, up until this point, every time that we've gone up against a state that wanted to enact some form of navigation easement around drones, we have been able to turn that tide and get to a point that either the law is not enacted, or we can even turn it into something positive where we have a study committee that's put together and our members are able to better inform an assessment of the current laws that are on the books and what's the best path forward. I think that the navigation easement push that previously we've had to deal with was heavily informed by a number of special interests that wanted to see that put in place. They were telling states that there were revenue opportunities on monetizing the airspace around drone use, and that really isn't well informed. It's not industry accepted, and we're still a nascent industry. I think a lot has changed in the last 5 years with drones, but we are still growing. We are still not necessarily using a lot of services in the airspace, and need to get to a point where all of these companies are generating resources that they can really start to give back to the community beyond the jobs that they're already providing, the economic benefit that they're providing from revenue and taxes and things of that nature.
It's interesting that just recently, the Ford Motor Company filed a patent for a systems and methods for operating drone flights over public roadways. Some call it a drone highway. I'm not familiar with the details, but Ford's patent shows that interest in this area is growing.
Yeah, I think what Ford was working on a patent for was essentially being able to operate a drone from a vehicle, whether that's to do something like assessing the traffic around you or being used in a work environment to document, progress of construction, things of that nature. I think that as an industry, we definitely have some work to do on uniform terminology so that we're all reading from the same page. I also see a lot of value in something like a UTM eventually becoming a reality. If we really want to integrate drones with traditional aircraft and the impending growth of eVTOL and AAM aircraft, we need to come up with an air traffic control system that is more technologically forward leaning. It's really timely that we're talking today. I know that this will be released down the line, but today on January 11th, we had the NOTAM system fail with the Federal Aviation Administration, and a lot of flights were grounded or delayed out of abundance of caution for safety. I think that our existing air traffic control system could use a little bit of an update, and that if we want to make drones part of that integrated airspace, we need to look at the risks and the specific use cases, whether that's something that's beyond visual line of sight and doing a drone delivery, or something a little bit heavier than a small UAS that's above 55 pounds. I think that we need to really do an assessment of the risks of the specific types of operations on who needs to be connected versus who doesn't need to be connected to something like a UTM in the future.
I should have asked earlier, but why did you choose Texas, Mississippi, Ohio, and California to focus the initial efforts?
We're targeting these 4 states because we want to find some places where we could hopefully have some success. As I mentioned, we're excited that Mississippi has put the bill on the calendar for us to eventually go and testify ahead of the Judiciary A Committee. We would like to see the model legislation turned into law on the books in these states. We understand that a place like California is likely not a 1-year term for us to get something passed, that there's some education, some relationships that we need to build. But I think that when you look at places like Texas and Mississippi and Ohio, we have a number of existing relationships and have worked with lawmakers over past sessions around a whole host of issues. So at a minimum, it's a place for us to start discussions. At the best, it's a place for us to find common sense legislation that's industry vetted and accepted, and we're able to get the drone industry growing in these states more than it already is.
So this is sort of a demonstration of a new AUVSI state partnership to build legislative consensus.
Yeah, so for us, advocacy became a really front burner issue as an association at the end of 2021. Our board decided that one of the best ways for us to really deliver value to our members was being very advocacy focused. I started at AUVSI in January of 2022, specifically brought in to work on these state issues. And so Drone Prepared is the culmination of a lot of work that we did over the past year and planning for the next 5 years and forward. And so these first 4 states, like you said, it's a good test bed for us to see how well can we coordinate with our chapters and with lawmakers where we have a good foothold, and then what would it look like to expand that down the line.
What's the next 6 months look like for Drone Prepared?
So for Drone Prepared over the next 6 months, our goal is to really push forward in our key states, as well as the states where we've gotten engagement back, and hopefully get some laws on the books, as well as then start thinking about what does a Drone Prepared look like in 2024. This is just our first version of it. I think we'd like to see it expand across other states and really start having conversations around things beyond just drones small, right? We work very heavily with a number of advanced air mobility and eVTOL manufacturers, as well as vertiport infrastructure builders. There's a lot of work that we can be doing on understanding when legislation makes sense and when it doesn't. If people want to point to specific federal rules, the technology changes a lot faster than the legislation does. So our goal is not to really pigeonhole or box the industry into a specific set of rules. We want the operations to be safe, but we don't want them to be hamstrung.
Does AUVSI have a space on their webpage for Drone Prepared where people can monitor progress?
Yes, we do. We actually have our own website, droneprepared.org, and we are putting out a weekly newsletter during session on bills that we're tracking, on progress that we're making. So the best thing to do is to visit droneprepared.org, sign up for the newsletter, And if you want to know more about the program and you're a lawmaker or you're in the general public, we are open to speaking to people. You can find contact information for myself and the rest of the state team, as well as our advocacy communications team. We've already had a number of meetings with people that are interested in Drone Prepared and what it is that they can do. You'll see a list on there, as well as a number of supporting members. Our Air Advocacy Committee is made up of, I think, 40 different companies at this point. We've had a few of them sign on in direct support for what we're working on. One of them is Airspace Link. We also have Aura Networks, as well as Wiley, our outside counsel on this. And we're always looking for more partners that can really agree with the messaging and that can also help us figure out where we may have forgotten to do something or may have misinterpreted something. We're always looking for industry perspectives on ways that we can improve Drone Prepared.
How will you leverage the value of the AUVSI chapters around the country?
Yeah, the chapters are really integral to what we're doing with Drone Prepared, because our state team is growing at AUVSI, but we're not on the ground everywhere, right? So it would be a lot of time and a lot of money for us to be in every single state house. So the benefit of having our more than 30 chapters is that we have a lot of people that are very close by, that are tied into the local drone community. And many of them have been very well educated just based on their experience flying and working in the space, as well as working closely with us on the issues that we're pushing out there. So we are involving them very much in when we send letters of support or opposition, or when we have conversations with lawmakers, if we need somebody to go to an aerospace day or to answer questions or be a liaison in the state, the chapters have been very helpful for us in that regard.
How did you get involved in the drone industry?
I've been in the drone industry for about 6 years now, and a lot's changed. I got into this, I'm an attorney by training, and we were building our own house, and I wanted to track that progress. And a friend of mine gave me a drone. I found out about 107, and I got involved on the commercial side.
And what was your UAS business?
My business was a Quad Axis, QUADAXIS LLC. I did a lot of work early on doing drone roof inspections when Drone Base got started. Texas was one of their test markets, and I think I did almost a couple hundred roof inspections all over East Texas. And then at one point, I got into doing construction progress tracking, and I went out to California and did power line inspections. So I've had a lot of experience actually flying drones in the field, and it's been great to pull that together with my legal experience on the advocacy side. So it's really exciting to do something that I enjoy doing. I'm really excited and interested in drones, and the fact that I can pull together my legal background with it and actually make change has been amazing. It's been really exciting, the meetings that I've been able to be involved in, whether that's with other drone associations, high level people at the FAA, or in the executive branch, as well as on the Hill. There's a lot of work that we're doing behind the scenes that most people don't know about, but we're always working to advance the industry. So it's been really great.
What chapter were you a part of?
So I'm based in Tyler, Texas, about 90 miles east of Dallas, and I was chapter leader here at the Lone Star chapter.
How did being a part of the Texas chapter of AUVSI impact your career in the drone industry?
So for me, AUVSI, I think, came in maybe about a year after I started my business. I had been participating a lot on the internet and forums and things like that, but actually being able to talk to people who were based here in Texas, going through a lot of what I had gone through or were already ahead of the game, and being there to help me was great. I was able to make a lot of connections for people that were either out there operating or building or had connections. And, as well as having a lot of people that I could go to different conferences with and know people that I could hang out with. I also had the benefit of a local company that was building a drone in a box here for first responders that I worked with for a little while. It was invaluable, the amount of people that I met with being a part of AUVSI. I think the members that are active in the association are really the thought leaders in the space. You get a mixture of the small individual operators all the way on up to the biggest companies you could think of in the drone space. And it puts you in an even playing field with them.
What was it about the AUVSI opportunity that made you decide to join up as part of the organization?
I wanted to learn more. I am an avid consumer of content, whether that's something like the podcast here that you do or others. I think finding other people who were leading the way in the drone space was really exciting. And that drew me in enough to start attending events, and it grew from there.
And for my final question, Scott, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
My thought is that we're headed in the right direction with new technologies and the prospect of AAM and drone delivery at scale, as well as ground-based autonomy. That said, I think we have a lot of work to do to continue around public acceptance and education, but the future's bright. There's a ton of opportunity in the autonomy and advanced aviation industry. We can really prepare for it by building the right infrastructure from a knowledge and workforce perspective, as well as from a physical and digital perspective. So all of that is to say that we should stay focused and forge ahead.
That's it for episode 387 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Scott Shtofman of AUVSI. I want to thank Scott for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Drone Prepared or want to connect with Scott, check out the webpage at droneprepared.org. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the costs of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.